Hello, everyone. My name is Elsie Gayle. I am a practicing nurse and midwife, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about my role in NHS culture change and why this is. So my own experience has informed my role in this area of working, because when I returned from working abroad in about 2001, I experienced a drastic change in the NHS culture, which seemed to go against my professional role as a midwife, particularly. And it concerned me that I was not able to raise concerns and have them resolved. So I actually began a journey, firstly being a trade union representative of the people in my workplace, observing what went on, and then learning a little bit about how it impacted people. The thing that really concerned me, though, was the fact that it had an impact on the lives of people that we were supposed to be caring for and actually doing no harm. So first of all, I just want to talk about what happened to me. I actually suffered, for no apparent reason, an episode of bullying, which caused me to turn into myself in a way that I had never done previously. But also it made me suicidal, which, people who know me would not believe that that would ever be a point of reference for myself. That actually concerned me a lot because I couldn't actually manage to engage the managers to reconcile this incident of bullying. And it caused me a lot of harm. In fact, I would say I have some permanent damage from the bullying I received. Thankfully, the person who bullied me and we managed to resolve the issue between ourselves, and we now enjoy a professional relationship. So that bit of it actually was put down. What I did come to realize, though, that the issues around the culture in the NHS while we were caring for patients was not good. It was deeply ingrained, and in many ways it was very complex. So I then undertook a journey into looking at why these things happened. Were they happening right across the board in the health service? Was it happening anywhere else in other organizations? And what were the factors that caused them to happen? So it took me then into joining a number of groups. For example, Freedom to Care, which was set up by a professor at Surrey University. That was my first experience of a group of people who were clinicians who came together to look at the effects on clinicians initially, and then on patients. What was the outcome of patients? What they were talking about was the immediate harm, but also the long-term harm, which I was then able to apply to my own work as a midwife, in terms of the immediate harm to mothers and babies, and then the long-term harm, which would possibly come later on. One of the things that actually came out of that was the ability to raise concerns, but also then to be sanctioned for raising concerns, and then the suppression of voices that needed to speak about what was going on so that things could change. We now call that whistleblowing. I personally would like to call it raising concerns, because that is what my profession requires me to do: raise concerns and then take it to a level where it could actually be resolved. I think, so coming forward now into where we are with this COVID-19 crisis, what we're seeing is the inability of people to actually raise concerns in terms of the personal protection that they need to deliver care safely. But also what is showing is the inequalities in how issues impact communities who are not heard, whether it is that the person comes from a racial group, which is what we're seeing with BME people who are dying at they are impacted by COVID at a disproportionate rate, or indeed clinicians who are working at the front line to deliver care and are unable to. They're impacted by the fact that they cannot raise concerns safely. So this journey of mine actually took me into looking very carefully. I was very fortunate to have a piece of project work to do, which was trying to bring best care to a very deprived area of my locality. And it was a research post initially. So it actually allowed me to look into all aspects of the health service. I was able to look at situations of the mental health sector. I was involved in maternity fora, which allowed me to look at each little section of the structures around the maternity services, including commissioning, regulation. I was able to look at the Department of Health, how that actually was structured and how it worked. And then I decided to look outside of the NHS into other organizations. So organizations allied to the NHS, but also organizations in social care, to see how it is, what was happening, and then were there any best practices that were ongoing in terms of changing the culture. Around that time, I actually met the work of Professor Michael West. He was part of a group of people doing the NHS survey at Aston University. And what was really interesting for me was that at that time, I was a trade union rep working with HR, looking very carefully at the culture inside the trust in which I was working. So being able to look at the actual sentences that were put by people on their survey paperwork, I was able to see, people were ticking the boxes, but then they were able to make comments that I found those things really significant. Well, what I did find was a challenge in terms of changing the culture based on the statements that were made. At that time, it became very clear to me that there was an issue about people who were of other ethnicities apart from white European. There was really a problem for people of African descent who appeared to be having a worse time, but their voices were absent. So that was one thing that I thought was important, particularly because myself, I have that. I identify as a person of African descent. So then looking towards solutions, because to be honest, that was the only reason I was undertaking this journey. It was about making things better for myself in terms of how I worked with the women and the families that I was contracted to do, but also to help my colleagues, some of whom were having a lot of issues around, raising concerns and actually having them addressed, but also improving their work-life balance. Because if people can have a good work-life balance, then when they come to work, they give up their role and the patient agenda is then satisfied. So patients actually benefit from how staff are treated. And this is what Michael West was talking about, how staff are treated impacts how patients, the patient outcome. I then started working with a patient safety group led by Dr. Kim Holt, called Patients First. It consisted of a number of doctors, nurses. I think I was the only midwife in the group, who had come together. They'd tried to raise concerns, but they decided to come together to make a concerted effort towards changing the agenda in terms of the culture in the NHS. I was able to work with regulators, well, certainly my regulator, in terms of some of the issues that we found. So raising the concern with them and working with them to try and address some of those problems systemically, from their perspective. I was also involved in a bullying support group called Dawn, which was set up primarily by teachers, and they were able to support people locally, but also have a number of conferences which drew on the expertise of people like Professor Michael West and others who had made some way into looking at the issues from an academic point of view as well. We eventually, Tim Field, Dr. Tim Field, who was well renowned in the world of bullying, we set up a group to have an annual lecture, which was held at Aston University in memory of Professor Tim Field. We had a number of people who came to the lectures. We grew a bit of a network, and then, you know, as organizations, you know, they form and then they grow and then they sort of fade out once the need is completed. So looking then towards the solutions that I'm working with now, I am part of a group of midwives, and what we're seeking to do is to embed best practice into maternity care. Very difficult in terms of engaging the NHS, because the NHS is enormous, but Better Births, which is the extant maternity policy, is actually talking about continuity of carer. And for us, certainly that is really important. And it is recognized right across the maternity spectrum as being one of the best ways, or the best ways, of engaging people. So giving continuity of carer allows the clinician to develop a trusting relationship with the client. And out of that, the relationship is beneficial to both, if it works well. The NHS has also, along with Roger Klein, embedded the Workplace Race Equality Scheme. This is of benefit to everyone, in particular those people who have protected characteristics. So, for example, people of the Black and ethnic minority groups, whereby it is, the RES is actually something that's done every year alongside the NHS reporting. And it demonstrates what is going on in the organization. So the organization knows what is happening, and then they have the ability to actually improve the situation for these protected groups. The NHS has also set up a scheme called the Whistleblowing Support Scheme. I was part of that pilot, and the pilot is now complete, but the scheme, I understand, is ongoing. And what it seeks to do is to identify people who are genuine whistleblowers and help them to get back into work. So it recognizes that there is a problem, and then seeks to improve the working lives, or make some recognition that there is a problem in terms of whistleblowing. People are raising concerns, but there is something that's stopping them from getting them resolved, and then they are attacked. So there is some recognition and some effort put into helping people who need to and who do raise concerns. The regulatory groups, I'm happy to say, seem to have taken an interest in working well. So the Nursing and Midwifery Council, they're actually moving towards making improvements in terms of helping to achieve patient safety outcomes. And then the trade unions, I know, have got on board, because I've been involved with the Royal College of Midwives, and I've observed some of the work that they're doing in terms of getting best practice in employment, best practice in recruitment and retention, and supporting people who actually raise concerns in the workplace. So the work continues. I guess it's going to be for some time to come. I'm continuing in my own personal journey to try to make a difference to the lives of mothers and babies. Very happy to take any questions that anyone might have. Thank you for listening.